Welcome to Command Control Power, a weekly podcast hosted by 3 certified members of the Apple Consultants Network, drawing from over half a century of combined experience. We talk shop, interview vendors and colleagues, and share what we've learned while operating our technology consulting practices. This is Joe Saponari of CyMac, and my 2 co-hosts are Jerry Zigman of MacWorks and Sam Valencia of the HCS Technology Group. For the freshest content, a peek behind the scenes, and more candid conversation about running our businesses, dealing with clients, fixing tough technical issues, and everything else you love about Command Control Power, we invite you to join us on Patreon so you don't miss any of this great content. Go to commandcontrolpower.com and click support. Pledge monthly, and you can instantly subscribe to the patron-only shows right in your favorite podcast app. Once again, to join us on Patreon and get the latest patron-only episodes, visit commandcontrolpower.com and click support. We hope to see you there, and thanks for listening. Hey, Jerry, how's your fall treating you so far this autumn in the Northern Hemisphere?
Yeah, we've had a little bit of a cold snap, not much, but the heat's gone on a couple times in the castle here. And
Nice.
So, yeah, we had a couple of workmen go down into the bowels of the castle and fire up the old coal furnace.
Yeah, I figured there's shoveling coal involved and maybe a conveyor belt to supply enough coal to heat the whole castle. I assume you have a few of those furnaces going on there.
Yeah, and a lot of shirtless guys sweating a lot down there, just shoveling coal all day long.
Yeah. What do those shirtless guys do in the off season when do they just hang around?
You've heard of pool boys? These guys are moat boys. So they help people. They maintain the moat. They make sure the alligators are well fed, that sort of thing.
Nice. Yeah, you don't want them to be too well fed, though. They need to be hungry enough so when somebody comes clambering along there trying to sneak around, the alligators are hungry for a meal.
Right. Some traveling minstrel comes by. And it might not be welcome. We want to make sure the alligators take care of the problem.
You've already got your own court jester there. You're not looking to hire anybody new. You don't need the solicitations. I get it.
Yeah, not since the pandemic. We're trying to keep what happens behind the castle walls stays behind the castle walls.
Cut costs just down to one entertainer on staff at a time, I guess, at this point. So, yeah, it's funny. I noticed that on the very first day of fall, I thought this was like a very appropriate thing. Here in Colorado, I was out walking by the creek. They call it a creek, but it's a pretty nice stream. There's a great path alongside it and all. And I went out. It was the first day of fall. And I was recently back in town and just went for a walk. And I noticed I started seeing some nuts dropping from the trees. And I look up and I see these squirrels furiously harvesting nuts and then rushing over to the side of the stream and burying nuts in the dirt there. And I'm like, this is so appropriate. It's the very first day of fall. They're just like on the ball. It's what squirrels do, right? They squirrel away the nuts for the winter. And I just thought they were right on time. It was pretty appropriate.
Yeah, winter is coming in your neck of the woods. That's
right.
For sure.
Yeah.
When do you see the first snowfall in your town?
It could be any day.
Wow.
And we might just get a sprinkle. But the thing is, it's really like right now I think it got up to 70 yesterday. It's still in the 60s typically most of the time during the day. It doesn't get too cold overnight, but you just never know. We could get like a freak storm that just takes it down to 4 degrees or something. And then it's just freezing. And the snow doesn't usually last because it's so dry. And so like the sun comes out and the snow melts unless we get like really dumped on it. It doesn't always hang around. So it's an interesting place to live. We get a lot of sun throughout the year, even in the winter. Yeah, it's really nice, but it can get cold for sure. But yeah, I was thinking, we talked recently, and I think I did a lot of griping. I haven't listened to those last 2 shows yet, but I think I did a fair amount of griping. And I wanted to start off with some, whatever the opposite of griping is, praising.
Okay.
Safari 16 has come out. And the first thing I noticed there was actually in the upgrade notes. They said, strong password editing lets you adjust strong passwords to meet website-specific requirements. What a great welcome feature. It's going to go great with my security upgrade tutorials that I do, which I mention about every 3 shows, and how successful that's been for clients, helping them get more secure using these strong passwords. Most people are still not necessarily on board with that. They click don't use. They don't want to use those crazy looking passwords, and I have to convince them why it's important to do it. And then they see the light. They see how easy it is. But every once in a while, I'm doing these demos and I'm like, okay, great, let's go through this. This is so simple and easy. It's going to make your life better. And then you hit a website where Safari doesn't doesn't have the formula, or it can't interpret the formula that's listed there, and it doesn't know to put in at least one number or one capital letter or whatever it has to do, or the site doesn't allow dashes or some crazy thing, your demo falls apart because you're relying on Safari to fill in a strong password and the website won't accept it. And so here's a great little workaround. If it's suggesting a password that the website doesn't accept, you can just go in and edit the strong password. You don't have to go in and say don't use and then make up your own from scratch. You can just modify the one from Safari. So nice feature. Thanks, Apple. That's fantastic.
So I'm seeing that in Safari right now, and I'm running Monterey. I'm not running the beta of the new OS that's coming out. And I do see edit password, and there's no built-in feature where it helps guide you along to add those extra characters. It just allows you to just go in and change the field. But there's no visual aid to modify the password. It's just you have to roll up your sleeves, whatever it takes to meet that criteria, it will honor.
Yeah, exactly. You do have to manually do it. It's like a fail-safe in the sense that if the ones it's suggesting don't meet the requirements of the website, you can edit them. And this is, of course, when it's prompting you for a new password or when you're going to change your password on the website. And Safari puts in the strong password suggestion there. You used to just have two options, like use this, use what Safari suggests or don't use. Now you can actually click it and say, use my own password or edit. You can edit the strong password as you're going in to fill in a new password for a website. I think that's really going to help. I didn't see this. I'm not sure if this is yet on the iPhone. I guess maybe I have to upgrade to iOS 16 to get this feature on the iPhone. I'm not sure if it's rolled out separately or when, but I had this come up just, I think, yesterday or the day before when I went to some site and their sort of onboarding workflow was just not good. And it required me to choose an account, choose a password, all this stuff, just to jump through these hoops to like book an appointment. The one that Safari was suggesting didn't work. And so my only option on the iPhone was to say, don't use the strong password. And I had to just make one up off the top of my head and then remember it and then type it in a second time. So it's a little annoying to have to do that. So it's nice if you can have the benefit of Safari generating something crazy looking and then just being able to modify it, because in that case it said, I forget, it needed a special symbol or something like that. And Safari didn't supply that by default.
As you're chatting away, and I am listening, I'm also looking at this baked in Safari feature, because had you not mentioned it, I probably would have continued to ignore it. In some cases, I do use the password they suggest and then update it in one password. My impression is that it could probably use a little bit more refinement or a little bit of spit and polish to get it working a little bit better for the average person out there, the average consumer. Yeah. But you're right. I mean, it's nice that it's there and at least they're heading in the right direction and just implementing a feature and improving upon it. Clearly, they have maybe a small team at least looking at this, and it's great. And I haven't noticed that change on the phone. We could do a live checkup here.
Nice, yeah.
Because I am.
Are you on 16?
Yeah. I've been on 16 since 2021, I think, or something like that.
Nice, yeah. Early betas. Yeah, I was going to mention iOS. I was traveling when we last spoke. I had just gotten back. So maybe last month or two, I was on the road a bit, and I was running iOS 15.6.1 probably for longer than I otherwise would. And I had just wanted to get to my desk before I upgraded to 15.7. And 15.6.1 was really noticeably buggier for me, like slow performance, battery was draining fast for no reason, apps were freezing. I think it was one of those, they had to rush the update out with whatever the most recent issues were that they fixed. And then 15.7 fixed the fix, basically. And that's been really good for me. So I've been just like stable on 15.7. But yeah, iOS 16, I feel like I hesitate usually less in updating an iPhone or an iPad. Certainly, I don't tell my clients to wait on that. That's as soon as they're ready to go. I think most people can just update. So I always look to get your feedback. So 16's been pretty good. Any little gotchas or anything like that?
No, actually, my big concern every time I move to a new OS, and sometimes I'll get on the early public beta, is will it still continue to work with my implementation of Ring Central? And there hasn't been any issues with that at all. So that's been great. No gotchas. And I did check here in Safari. It doesn't seem like the same feature is there like it is on the Mac. So maybe that's coming sometime in the future, but it doesn't seem like it's got that extensible pop-up window there with other options.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I hope they do roll it out, because to your point, it's a nice little refinement, and I like how they are continuing to improve that feature and focus on it. It is really important to people. I mean, there are new security features coming out from Apple as well with, what do you call it, passkeys. And most people are still in the realm of passwords, and anything that Apple can do to make it easier for people to do the right thing with passwords. Because just, again, to the point I make every 3 episodes about my security upgrade tutorial that I often recommend to clients, a lot of people are still they just throw it out there. I'm just using the same password for everything. And I'm like, that just stop right there. That's really bad. You can't do that anymore. Or it's just a really bad password at that. It's like it's a word in like their birth year or something. It's just, don't do that. Come on. I just love that Apple is really continuing to refine that feature. And it's something that's really important, and it is what people need and want, whether they know they want it or not. But not to mention the fact that iCloud, and I was skeptical when they were like forcibly onboarding people 10 years ago or whatever it was to iCloud. So if you had an Apple ID, you were opted into iCloud almost on new Mac upgrades. I'm glad they did. I'm glad that this is a standard feature that basically everybody has. When a client doesn't use iCloud, well, why not? There's no good reason not to, really, as far as I can tell. And the fact that everybody has it, they not only have a built-in password manager on each device, but it also syncs. That changes everybody's mind once they know, oh, I can look up my passwords on my iPhone. This is great. So yeah, that's a really nice benefit from Apple. So another little thank you there. And then the last thing on Safari 16 is it actually offers to save the security code for credit cards. And of course, I always wondered, I'm like, why doesn't it just save the security code? Is it like so secure? So I'm not that worried about my credit cards anymore. If there's ever any kind of fraud on a credit card, pretty much the credit card companies have your back on that. Typically, it's not that hard to catch it and then to just put in a claim and unwind that and get a new number. Saving the security code is a nice option to have that they previously just didn't have that option. But I just had to remember the 3 digits or 4 digits for each card. Now they just, when you type it in, the next time you make a purchase, Safari actually says, hey, by the way, now I can do this. Or do you want me to save that security code? So another nice feature.
Yeah, that was probably a holdover from another time when the sensibility was, we'll carry everything over, we'll store all the information except for the security code, and that'll be your extra layer of security. And now, like you say, the sensibility is, save it all for me. I'm using biometric feedback. I'm using my fingerprint, or I'm using Face ID if I'm on the phone. So things have definitely gotten a lot more locked down. And you're right. That's exactly what the credit card has been for all these years. And people are always afraid to give maybe a tech like us a credit card or doing a swipe. And that's why you have a credit card. And maybe there's folks out there that don't monitor their charges, and maybe they should. If you see something that's fraudulent, the credit card company responds immediately.
Yeah, exactly. I think like maybe going back 15 years, people were more wary of credit card fraud and other concerns about really just about credit cards, like who you're giving your number to. These days, any reputable company is going to be using Stripe or some similar payment gateway. And they're going to be storing your card securely, where even the merchant you give it to doesn't have access to it. And on the flip side of that, I had a client today say, should I not email someone the photo of my credit card, both sides? And I'm like, yeah, correct. Yeah, you should not do that. That is correct. And that's obviously the question was coming up because she probably had just done that recently. But the difference is you don't want it sitting in someone's email inbox or in your own sent items. Like, you just don't want to just have it lingering in email, but supplying the card number and all the info to make a purchase, you don't have to really think twice about that these days.
Yeah. I've had clients text me a card from time to time, and I think under the guise of getting paid on time, I'll accept that.
Yeah.
And I think it's a little bit more secure. It's a one-to-one relationship. It's an encrypted communication, and it's as secure as the other end, and I am the other end. Yeah, I'm not going to necessarily store that in another location on my computer, but I may delete that text, or it may sit there if I don't think about it.
Yeah. I think the order is live on the phone with a person who you've got some kind of like voice confirmation that is the person. That when a client calls my office number and they get someone they're familiar with talking to, it's okay. Providing it by phone live is probably the best thing you can do, because it's ephemeral. It's that call goes away. Like we type it into a system and then we don't have access to it anymore. If you leave it on someone's voicemail, that's maybe secondary, like still not terrible because it's just voicemail and they're probably going to delete the voicemail, whatever. But okay, that's better than an email still. Text is probably next in line or equal to voicemail maybe. And then email is obviously the worst. And yeah, it's just funny what people don't really intuitively know with this stuff. What the things they're worried about don't match the real concerns and vice versa. They're concerned about things that are not something to worry about. But yeah, it's just one of those things. It's all about user training, really. So I got one more thing on the iPhone. I was talking recently about how my iPhone brightness gets throttled in outdoor settings, in direct sun, and just in a relatively hotter environment, the screen dims. And I'm sure other people out there have noticed this. And this is something that actually came up. I heard it on another podcast recently as well. And then a little tip from Jason Cinal in his iPhone 14 Pro review. He mentions how Apple said the iPhone display will now peak at 2000 nits in outdoor settings. And I'm like, that's a good number of nits. I don't know how many nits I had before, but cool. And which is great. He mentions an admirable goal since it's often hard to see iPhone content, especially the nuances of HDR in a bright environment. But to me, the issue has not really been brightness necessarily, like when it's fully functional. I think that in my experience, it typically just gets dimmer when it's hot. It's not so much that like the peak brightness was too low. It's just that it couldn't sustain it. So that's what I'm really curious about feedback for. If any listeners out there have had that experience where it dims in bright light or dims in the heat, does the iPhone 14 Pro fix that? Not that's a reason necessarily on its own to upgrade, but I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, I was waiting for you to drop in another justification this episode for you to maybe upgrade again.
Yeah.
Because you just got a phone last year, and you're going to build up a backlog of justifications, and then you're just going to capitulate.
Just buy two iPhone 14 Pros. That's how much justification I have.
Exactly. You're building up enough justification for not one, but two, right?
Yeah. Exactly. I've got another one on that actually, which is
I figured.
I'm looking for some feedback from you, Jerry, on the MacBook Air 13-inch with the M2 chip. Now, I don't know if you can give me this feedback specifically, but how is that working for you just in general compared to your previous MacBook Pro 13-inch?
Yeah, it's been great. And mentioned before on another episode, I had an M1 with only 8 gigs of RAM, and I found that the only way I could successfully use the machine on a daily basis was to restart it every 24 hours. And I don't think there was anything wrong with it. I just got a lot of bells and whistles and machinations and startup icons and all kinds of crazy stuff running on my machine. But I don't think any of it is resource intensive. But it's not a standard installation out of the box. And since I've upgraded to this M2 with 16 gigabytes of RAM, I can go longer than a week without restarting. It's terrific.
Nice. Yeah, my MacBook Pro 13-inch 2020 model with M1, I have 16 gigs of RAM, and I have had about the same experience you're describing with your new one, where I can go a solid week, no problem, but there's a cliff it falls off of. It's not like it just slowly gets slower over time. It just all of a sudden is like really different in performance. Like it just gets really slow all of a sudden. And it occasionally, the other thing I'll see is you're out of application memory. I'm not doing that much stuff, but okay, I'll quit Chrome because that's usually one of the culprits. That usually only happens after 7 to 10 days or something. And that's again with my 2020 model. And here I am trying to justify a new one, not because I necessarily need it, but I do like to keep a little bit more headroom. You mentioned, I think your original Mac was 8 gigs of memory and now the 16 gigs. I'm not sure if that made a lot of the difference for you. I suspect that it did, because I think running really close to the limit with memory, even though the SSD is so fast, it's just taxing the system unnecessarily to page back and forth to the SSD and all. So I think the 16 gigs for you probably made all the difference, in addition to obviously the new fast processor and all that. For me, I'd probably go max it out if I got the MacBook Air. I'd probably go 24 gigs of memory, and that would be one of the sort of main improvements. But the biggest reason I'm considering actually taking the plunge myself is that I rock my Mac in clamshell mode all the time with a nice big 27-inch monitor. It's just a Dell. It's not the Apple Studio display. I didn't spring for that. I couldn't justify it. But having a big monitor is great, and a keyboard and a mouse and all that. So I basically use my MacBook Pro as a desktop. And because it's MacBook Pro, it has a fan, so there's no throttling that's happening due to heat. If the machine gets hot, the fan ramps up, and it mostly keeps it cool enough where I don't notice any kind of like thermal throttling. Whereas with the Intel MacBook Air, I just got burned. Ashley had two of those that had this problem. Sam knows very well about this problem where the Intel MacBook Air had this issue where even with a fan, it just couldn't keep itself cool enough and it would throttle the processor pretty hard. And it was a very noticeable difference in speed when that happened. And I'm curious if in your case with the MacBook Air M2, since it doesn't have a fan, I think like for most people, that's not an issue. Using it as a laptop, no problem. But using it in clamshell mode, when it's less the cooling system, which is basically just like the case is the heat sink, there's no fan. I just think the clamshell mode would affect the ability to keep it cool. And if you're running all day, like with apps running and different things using the processor, I think it may be noticeable. So I'm really curious if anyone out there is using the M2 MacBook Air in clamshell mode with an external monitor and everything. Have you noticed any throttling due to like heat? Because clients where I think this would be a good system, but a couple of them do use clamshell mode, like they use it like a desktop. And I definitely don't want to have somebody upgrade from like a MacBook Pro from 3 or 4 years ago and have the MacBook Air with M2 be a nice fast machine, but be a downgrade in their kind of desktop mode. So if anyone out there has had this experience, I'd love to hear it. Otherwise, that's part of my justification for trying out the new MacBook Air M2.
So you're putting out an official call for listener feedback. So if I heard this, there's a couple of folks that reach out to us on the Slack channel. But if I was just listening to the show and I wasn't doing the Slack regularly, how would I get in touch with you, Joe? What would I do? Would I call you directly? Would I look for your business on the internet? How would I give you some feedback if I ran my computer in clamshell mode and could give you some guidance?
Yeah, Slack is a great option. So if you're on Slack or if you're not on Slack, get on Slack. It's the Mac Admin Slack. So macadmins.org. You can sign up for the Slack there. It's free. It's a great service of Mac admins. And yeah, so Slack is a great primary channel. We have Command Control Power, our own channel there, and it's a great way to reach out to us. Otherwise, go to our website, commandcontrolpower.com, and you can click on the contact there or send us an email from there. And yeah, we'd love to hear your feedback about this or any other topics.
Okay, so I could go to the website and for Command Control Power. Won't fall on deaf ears. One of us will read it. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, absolutely. Sam has joined us and might have a comment here. Sam? Sam might be muted.
I love it, Joe. You're always going for the gag here at the.
It's not a gag.
In the middle of the show.
Sam says, "I'll chime in about Slack if that's cool." Like, Sam,
and here I am.
Hey, great timing.
It's good
Sam,
when the
microphone
is set to the wrong input. That's always awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that mention the Mac Admin Slack and just the whole fact of the Mac Admins Foundation and keeping it free. And I always want to point that out to people that they can check out the Mac Admins Foundation and donate to that cause, because that's what makes it available for all of us. And it's pretty wicked. And they also have some cool gear, like T-shirts and mugs and all that stuff. So just wanted to give a plug for Mac Admins Foundation.
Yeah, great tip. And I've learned so much there. I'll just add my own plug, which is that I read a tip recently that I thought, I got to file this one away. And this happens all the time. And Slack is great. You can bookmark things that you just want to remember. I've got this running list of just like random little tips that other people have mentioned that are just bookmarked in Slack, essentially. But the tip that I read was from our supporter, actually, and a Mac Admins contributor, Kevin M. Cox. This actually came to my attention through the Scripting OS X newsletter, in fact. But I've also seen this posted about on Slack. So he mentions that if you see this message, this Mac is locked. Try again in 24,284,826 minutes. So I'm not going to wait that long. The issue is that...
Sounds like a Rent song.
Yeah, exactly. So definitely a musical number there. The issue is that the Mac is locked, but also that the system clock has reset back to January 1st, 1970. And so if you see that issue, there's a workaround to basically get it online. So you can use a USB-C Ethernet adapter or whatever the case may be to plug it into Ethernet so that it can actually just contact the time server and reset its own clock. Then you've essentially waited long enough, right? And then you can unlock it. But just little tips like that where this, again, came up on Slack, and there's so many little things like that where, okay, I'm glad I don't need that right now, but I know that there's a solution if I do, and it's somewhere in Slack. So it's such a great resource.
I'll actually chime in about that. I posted on Slack in the Firefox channel, months ago about something related to, I was trying to manage Firefox better and hide certain features of it. And Firefox doesn't have all the bells and whistles that like Google Chrome does for that stuff. So I talked in the Firefox channel, and a couple people were helping me out, but we didn't come up with an answer because it just wasn't a feature available. So in the channel, I just said, notify me about this thread. And months later, just the other day, someone started responding in that thread about new developments in that and how they've gotten it to work. And I'm like, holy cow, I totally forgot about this. But now it just came back because I decided to follow the thread, and I have my answer, even though it's months later, but it's still something that I was looking for.
You know why it was months later? It's probably only 7 people are in that Firefox channel.
Firefox, yeah, exactly.
Foxfire, you mean? I think that was the channel I was supposed to be on.
It's been a few minutes. I've got a gripe. Are you guys ready for my gripe?
Of course.
Yeah, we're almost 30 minutes into the show, Joe. Are you running a temperature right now? Because it's not you.
It's a minor one. This is just like an annoying email from Google. I was griping about Google in one of the last shows as well, where they're like, we need access to your whole photo library to do anything. And it's no, you don't. You just want all my photos. But anyway, this was an annoying email from Google. And it was, your storage is 25% full. 3.82 gigs used of 15 gigs. I'm like, yeah. Like, why are you emailing me about this?
Why is that an alert?
It's taken me like years to get to that point. Like, I don't need an alert about it. It's like, you use storage when you send and receive email on Gmail, backup Google Photos. It just explains it to me like I'm an idiot. It's like, here's how to manage your storage. Get to Google One, go to Google One and upgrade or whatever. I'm like, I don't need to upgrade. Like, it's just like a baseless email from them. This is why I get so much noise from clients when they just forward you stuff like this. They're like, what is this? What does this mean? I'm like, do I need this kind of noise going to my own inbox, let alone to all of my clients half the time? It's just such a waste. I assume 1 in 1,000 of these will result in somebody subscribing for $100 a year that doesn't need it, and Google wins in that case. So it's like they, on some actuarial table, it's like they justify doing it, but it's just frustrating. It's what you call a dark pattern on the web. And just, I wish they could just like not bother me until it's actually a concern.
I was listening to that episode, Joe, and that was really bothersome of the tactic that Google Photos was using to say that we need access to your entire photo library. The fact that it didn't really accept if you needed to use backup, which is an option, was really bothersome to me. And I know I'm rehashing what you already said, but that's like a horrible practice.
Yeah, it was diabolical, Sam.
It's true. It's true. And it's like it's a modal like pop-up. You literally can't even decline it. You can't just say like advanced, let me turn this off, or opt out of backup, or opt out of a full upload or something. It's like there's just no choice. So if you want to use the Google Photos app, which by the way, Google directed me to from the website, they're like, it's better in the app. So I'm like, okay, I'll bite when I get the app. And I can't actually use it unless I give them all my photos. That's not fair. It's not a good, so silly. Yeah. All right. I got one more little dark pattern here. And this relates to Apple, unfortunately, tangentially, but I was trying to sign up and put Apple Business Essentials through its paces. And so I went through the onboarding from scratch, and I thought they couldn't, for some reason, I forget why, but they couldn't like find me and based on my DNB number, or I forget what the issue was, but essentially like I ended up somehow getting a new Dun & Bradstreet number for my company. And I think it was actually because my address was wrong on the existing one. So I would have had to update this first with Dun & Bradstreet and then go through the Apple process. But I didn't realize that at the time. So by, I guess, looking up my info, I somehow enrolled in a new DNB number, whatever. So I went through the Apple enrollment, got that sorted out, only to find out, by the way, it's like, you're already signed up. I know I am, but it was just silly. So that was a waste of time to even go down this road. But the side effect of quote unquote registering with Dun & Bradstreet, and by the way, I had to call Dun & Bradstreet and reconnect my two separate accounts. When I noticed that I had a new account that was started more recently, I had to go back and say, no, I want this to be part of my existing profile that shows that I've been in business for 18 years and all. So I did that with Dun & Bradstreet. But the bottom line is, after these calls to Dun & Bradstreet and getting this new enrollment and whatever, I started getting all of these finance company cold calls, voicemails left on my company number. We have funding for your new business and this and that. I guess Dun & Bradstreet gets you on a list of new businesses. And then you start to get solicitations from finance companies saying, hey, we can fund your new business. And then I even get these letters that look like handwritten letters. Have you guys seen these where it's like literally somebody wrote on the envelope my name and company name and address and all that stuff?
Oh yeah, I've seen those.
Yeah, just to get me to open it. So I'm basically getting inundated with this stuff for no reason because they think I'm a new business. And that's really a bad trade-off too.
That's interesting you bring that up because what's happening, as you guys surmise, is that D&B is selling your information to these other companies and they're getting money off of it.
Yep.
And what's really puzzling to me, and I guess it's the only mechanism Apple can use right now, is that prior to the early days of the internet and even before the internet, when I was involved in the family business, we would always get hustled by Dun & Bradstreet to join the service. And you need to sign up for our services because what if somebody that wants to do business with you needs to look at your credit or look at references? So a lot of people get all anxious and they think, oh yeah, we got to pay into Dun & Bradstreet so they show that we have a really good record and we have good relationships with other businesses. And it's very reminiscent, present day, to send the letters to Joe and Sam, by the way, before I say this. It reminds me of LinkedIn, where it's LinkedIn. You can join it for free, just like you can with Dun & Bradstreet, but to get the real good stuff and to make those really positive connections, you've got to pay for a LinkedIn premium service. And it's just maddening that this would happen to you, Joe, that you're reaching out to them and they're really, I don't know, like what they do present.
Yeah, I don't either. And it's when you're reaching out to them for support, one of the primary options, I forget if it was on their phone tree or on their website, but it's something about Apple. It's like I need help with my Apple thing. And so Apple's got to be one of the biggest customers if there is that kind of relationship. And I guess it's like you said, it must be a way for Apple to verify your info, obviously, with some kind of third party company that's responsible for maintaining that. I don't know, maintaining if somebody files a complaint or if I don't really even know what's on record with them specifically.
Yeah, and I guess they collect information on whether the business is incorporated, how long it's been incorporated, who are the officers of the business. So this basic information that there's nobody else, I guess, out there that does this, or if there is, they're not as big as Dun & Bradstreet. And so this seemed like a likely partner for Apple just to do some very surface level vetting for companies when they want to open up a Apple Business Manager account or Apple School Manager account, that this was the way to do it. But I don't know. It just seems like a holdover from an earlier time.
Yeah. Yeah. I felt if this is the result of just doing normal business with Apple, that like suddenly I'm on a list that basically Apple's partner, Dun & Bradstreet, sold my info as part of some big list of quote unquote new businesses or people that might want funding or something like that. I don't think Apple would like that. I don't think that's something Apple would have agreed to in that contract, but it might have just been a side effect of me calling them and having to like get them to reunify my two listings or something. I don't exactly know, but it was definitely a side effect of dealing with Dun & Bradstreet. And I'm just curious if anybody's customers out there have had that same issue, because that's really not good if like we say, hey, let's get you enrolled in Apple Business Manager, Apple Business Essentials with Apple. And then your customers start to like these solicitations for funding opportunities and things that would not be good. So I can't imagine that's part of the normal flow, but that definitely happened to me as a result.
Just to pick up the baton here on the same theme, and it literally happened to me today. A little bit of personal information. For the last 3 years, we leased a car. My wife is set to turn over the lease because the lease is ending. And we were thinking of maybe buying the car outright because a lot of dealerships have low inventory. And it used to be when you came to your end of your lease, you could flip over a car and for the same payment amount, you could get into a new car and you lease it for another 3 or 4 years. But of course, because of the pandemic, car industry is topsy-turvy. Interestingly, as a sidebar to this conversation, I have a couple of clients that run car dealerships. And this may or may not surprise you, but one is a Honda dealer, and they also have a Toyota dealership. This past 12 to 18 months has been their most profitable season on record, or profitable quarter after quarter. Wow. The tremendous profits.
I'm surprised right now.
Because they have inventory and everything is full price and then some. And so it used to be they would sell these cars at cost and then they would get the rebates from the manufacturer. And now these dealerships, at least the one that I work for, is making colossal profit.
Yeah, they need to upgrade their service plan, Jerry.
You can't find a car below sticker or above everywhere you go. So I can see why they're making money hand over fist.
Yeah.
So here's my story. So I get online and I look for just used car rates in Connecticut, right? Used refinance car rates, 3-year, 4-year, whatever. And I do a Google search and I see this thing called Lending Tree. And a few times I've seen the ad on TV and I really didn't think much of it. And so they just needed a little bit of information to give me some Connecticut rates because that's what I was looking for. Ultimately, I didn't get Connecticut rates. I just got some nationwide car lenders, which was not relevant at all. But in doing so, I had the little pop-up and I was in Safari and I used the hide my email, right? So we gave them this bogus address and everything gets forwarded onto your iCloud identity. And it created this new random address, hide my email, right? And for the phone number, I have a secondary number for my Ring Central business that I could do a lot of heavy blocking. So I didn't give them my personal phone number. I gave them a business number that we don't normally use and this hide my email. I kid you not, within 5 to 10 minutes, I was literally bombarded with no less than maybe 15 phone calls, and they were all identified as spam, so they didn't ring through. Because I went back to RoboKiller for the spam blocking app on my phone. And so all the business calls come in on my iPhone. So those were all blocked. But I was like, boom, 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 like that. I could make that noise again.
Did it make those sounds? Yeah. Just making sure.
And then the email, I got these crazy emails getting fired off from all these lending institutions. Like, hey, we noticed you're looking for a used car. Reach out to us, blah, blah, blah. And thank goodness I did it the way I did it. And I didn't go down the rabbit hole any deeper. But the beauty of the hide my email is you go right into your iCloud settings and I can deactivate that email address. No, I won't get any of those emails anymore. And the only thing I have to keep on doing is just blocking those phone calls. But look out.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing how many businesses out there just basically do the same kind of thing where any bit of info they can gather about you that you're interested in a car or a house or whatever, and they have some little bits of info, then they can just inundate you with that kind of marketing. It's just, It's terrible. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank goodness for hide my email and Apple for the win here. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I've been using that a ton lately for any services I'm signing up for. Even if they feel legitimate, I'm just so scared of what has happened to me in the past. And your story, Jerry, really ties me back into making sure I'm using it properly, because I've heard of those types of practices from Lending Tree and similar companies, but within minutes is insane.
It was scary. Yeah. So you're using that for your OnlyFans accounts, Sam, and Fansly's?
I use my real one for that because I want everyone to know how to reach me. That's Command Control Power After Hours.
Speaking of email and masking your email and all that stuff, don't you guys love it when you get an email from a client and the name is work email? It's like their from name. It's from work email. It's their name. It's janedoe.com. But it's clearly like they set up their own thing and they put in their what they thought was the description into their name. And it's personal. It's okay, personal. I'll get right back to you.
That's like the one I sent you guys over the weekend that it was enrolled in one of our MDMs. Someone had enrolled their work phone and they called it Work Daddy. And I was like, okay.
Right. I had a good one. I don't know I couldn't chase this down for a long time, but in my contacts, this person was, let's say her name was Jane Doe. For some reason, the word country was showing up as her middle name. So I would get these correspondence to be like Jane Country Doe. and I would find it. And I don't know, it got cross-populated with some other email identity that had the word country in it or something like that. And so I would chase it down and I would find it and I thought it would be gone. And then a few months would go by and Jane Country Doe sending more email.
Yeah, they see somebody and then you reply back, reply all. And then you notice like on the CC line, it's like mommy. And then the email's there. It's weird, right? Because it's like it uses the name that they quoted to you when you like reply back to them. It's, I didn't call you mommy. Like that's
Jerry does his voices of customers of all kinds.
Am I on the cloud?
Joe spins his deeply detailed yarns all the time.
I have a whole story about this.
Sam is on the road again, phoning in from a hotel.
At least we know where I am.
Half a century combined of